I guess I'll start here now. Um, so my name is Jesse Terry with Yellowstone-Teton Clean Cities, and this is our monthly renewable diesel working group. I think we're coming on close to 2 years now of doing this. Interest seems to continue, and new people are discovering renewable diesel. But after doing nearly 20 of these, I'm running out of ideas, and so Um, I've wanted to talk about sustainable aviation fuel for a while, and it comes up often enough, and it's directly related. And I think some of the background information that I'll go over here will help people better understand renewable diesel as well. So this is a little bit new to me. I've known about it and I understand renewable diesel fairly well, and there's a lot of similarities, but some of the I'm definitely not an expert here, so I learned a lot of this week while making this presentation. So I may have some things wrong, and definitely there'll be questions I may not be able to answer, but I'm hoping maybe we can go into a more in-depth SAF discussion at some point if there's interest. As I mentioned at the beginning of all of these, our Clean Cities is a program of the Department of Energy's Vehicle Technologies Office. I think there are close to 80 Clean Cities coalitions now, including Alaska now. And you can see we cover most of the country. Our specific coalition covers Montana, Wyoming, and Eastern Idaho. Our territory is a little bit more than that image shows. But if you're in one of these other areas and want to learn more about anything renewable fuel related for transportation, you can reach out to your Clean Cities coalition. One more question plug. I was asked to talk at the Ski Area Vehicle Maintenance Institute convention or conference in Grand Junction, Colorado in May. I think it's going to be more than just one of these talks. I guess I was told there's an hour and a half I have to fill. So I have some ideas, but if anybody is going to be there from a ski resort or for any other reason and wants to participate and knows anything about renewable diesel, I'd be happy to have you. So jet fuel in the US. Some of these things were new to me, but you can see that this is older data from 2017, but jet fuel makes up a big piece of the transportation fuel consumption in the US. And I don't know the number exactly, you could do the math, but it looks like it's maybe 20% of the fuel consumed in the US is jet fuel. So it's a significant fuel that is used. And so here's the correlation. I actually had AI make this for me. Not that I couldn't have made it myself, but SAF, sustainable aviation fuel, is to jet fuel, or Jet A, as renewable diesel is to ultra low sulfur diesel. So yeah, so that's the relationship and why we're talking about it. Jet fuels can be broken up into many different categories. There's Jet A, Jet A1, Jet B, there's JP 1 through 10. There's SAF that we're going to be talking about, and there's Jet B. And there's slight differences between all these fuels. Between Jet A and Jet A1, it seems the freezing point is the main difference. So in Alaska and Canada in the winter, they would use a lot of Jet A1. Jet B appears to be a mix of like gasoline and kerosene, or naphtha and kerosene blend, and it gets it even to a colder point. So for very, very cold conditions, you can use that. JPs were military blends, and they vary all over the board. And so all these, the Jet A and Jet A for sure has an ASTM standard, D1655. SAF also has an ASTM standard. This is the same as petroleum diesel and renewable diesel. They have their own ASTM standards, but SAF has its own ASTM standard, D7566, and that's within the 1655. So it's sort of a substandard within Jet A standards. So it meets all those, but it has some other things with it as well. And SAF, I won't get into it much, but SAF is rarely used 100%. It's used, I think, 20 or maybe 20 or 30% up to 50% in current jet engines. What it seems to, the reason for that seems to be that a lot of the seals and the rubber maintain their elasticity because of the aromatics that are found in petroleum jet fuel, because they've been designed to work with that fuel. you can run 100% SAF and it'll work, but the seals will tend to maybe become more brittle or shrink, and there could be issues. So that's why currently I don't think anybody uses more than 50%, because SAF, as you'll see, doesn't have these aromatic compounds in it. So the difference between SAF and jet fuel is made from crude oil. Sustainable aviation fuel can be made from many things, but it's renewable feedstocks. So vegetable oil, animal fats, garbage, hydrogen, ethanol, all these can be precursors to making sustainable aviation fuel depending on the pathway that's used. Of relevance to us in Montana, we have Montana Renewables, which produces renewable diesel, but they also produce the largest volume of sustainable aviation fuel in North America. So they are a big player here. And then late last year, they were awarded a almost $1.5 billion loan from the Department of Energy to expand SAF production specifically. So it's going to grow. That's the intent, and I think the demand is there. These images were pulled from a company, 12.co, and they focus on, maybe you could think of as potentially the cleanest way to make SAF, which is using carbon dioxide and hydrogen and electricity to make SAF. And I'll go into the economics of that in a bit, but it may seem leaned to that side of things. But the other way that you could make it is with fats and fatty acids, so animal fats, vegetable oils. And then you can make it with ethanol, so they call it alcohol to jet. So using ethanol made from corn fermentation or any other way. And then you can use some chemistry and some different techniques to make SAF. And then you can use waste products, garbage, and you use syngas and then modify that in a similar way and build SAF from that. I'll get a little bit into some chemistry because that's how I often think. And so the way that you can make sustainable aviation fuel with animal fats and vegetable oils is how it's made in Great Falls. And that's the primary way that it's made in North America. And I think in the world, that's where the bulk of the SAF, or that's the method that most used to produce SAF. And that first image on the top left is triglyceride, which is a vegetable oil or a fat. And what I'm trying to show is that there are three chains. It looks like the letter E in a way. And so you have these three long carbon chains, and you have a 3-carbon backbone. And so this is similar to how you make biodiesel, but what you're doing is essentially cleaving or cutting that backbone off, and you end up with, from this molecule that you can see, you end up with 3 long hydrocarbon chains and a short 3-carbon chain, which is propane. So from a vegetable oil, you end up with 3 essentially diesel molecules and a propane molecule. And you're not really changing much. There is some chemistry done in that, but that's pretty simple how it would work. And so this paper where I got this picture from estimates that there's not an infinite source of used cooking oil or animal fats, and that we can maybe make up 5% of the aviation fuel demand in this fashion because of the vegetable oil feedstocks. And at $1,400 per ton of feedstock, so that's waste or raw or virgin cooking oil, whatever it might be, that's the average. At $1,400 per ton, that would give you a sustainable aviation fuel price of $4.15 per gallon to produce it. So we'll start with that one. Then the alcohol to jet fuel. So this is a little bit more complicated. You have to start with ethanol, and you can't just get ethanol. You have to typically ferment some kind of sugar with yeast to make ethanol, and ethanol itself is a fuel. So you're taking an existing fuel and you're maybe upgrading it by doing some different chemistry steps. And so ethanol is a 2-carbon hydrocarbon. So SAF, or sustainable aviation fuel, is anywhere from maybe 14 carbons to 16, 17 carbons. It can vary. So you have to combine many of these and kind of build them together to make a larger molecule. And that's what that chemical equation shows. You have ethanol, you do some dehydration, you pull a water molecule off, you end up with ethylene, and you put those together and build up a paraffin or a diesel molecule. And again, here they estimate, what I have circled in green there is that there maybe is enough to do 50 billion gallons of SAF. And that, again, isn't all the jet fuel that we consume. So this can't replace jet yet either. And at a cost of $1.70 per gallon for ethanol, SAF would cost $2.83 per gallon, which is similar to what Jet A costs to produce. So gasification of garbage in this case produces syngas, which is carbon monoxide, and you add some hydrogen, and you work these together in the Fischer-Tropsch system, and you end up building these larger molecules. So you'll get a larger, longer chain, and you'll end up with a bunch of water as a byproduct. So we're taking a small molecule, we're just doing chemistry to build up a bigger molecule. So at $60 per ton, that's the average cost of garbage that works in this process. SAF would cost about $1.20 per gallon. So it seems really low, but to get those feedstocks cleaned up to a stage where they can actually be used in this process is very expensive. And the equipment and setup and process building for this is also very, very cost prohibitive. So right now, it's not the cheapest way to do it. It costs a lot to do it this way. And then the last method I'll touch on, and I think there are a couple other, there are many variations of each of those, and I think there are one or two other ways, but these are the primary four. This way is to take carbon dioxide out of the air and get hydrogen, which you could get from hydrolysis of water, and to get carbon monoxide and hydrogen, and that's syngas, and then using that syngas in that same system to build up a larger molecule. So this has no organics, so it's not really a biofuel, but it doesn't have any crude oil, of course. And so in this case, to produce hydrogen via hydrolysis takes about 60 kilowatt hours of energy to produce a gallon of SAF. So depending on what you're like, so it really is hinges on the cost of electricity. If you have free electricity, this could be a very cost-effective way. If your electricity here, for example, it's 13 cents a kilowatt. In that case, it would cost you $7.80 just in electricity to make a gallon of SAF this way. So it really requires inexpensive or cheap, clean electricity to do it this way, but you can make it almost from thin air. The other thing that I did some math on here, at 60 kilowatt hours of electricity per gallon of SAF, 60 kilowatts of electricity will drive a regular EV about 180 miles. A gallon of SAF would probably drive a diesel car, and you could put it in a diesel car. It would probably drive that car about 50 miles. So does it make sense to take something that could drive an EV 180 miles, change it so that it can drive something 50 miles? It doesn't make sense for a car, but for air travel, I guess it could. Also worth considering, you're making hydrogen. So that hydrogen you could put into a hydrogen fuel cell into an electric airplane. Like those exist, and that's not unreasonable. So we're upgrading a fuel and we're wasting energy to do it, but it can be done. And so this, essentially, there's an unlimited source of CO2. So this could theoretically meet the demand of jet fuel consumption globally, assuming we have nearly free electricity. So each of those paths produce a mixture of hydrocarbon chains that are almost SAF, but at the end, depending on how complicated that mixture is, you still usually need to distill it out into its components. So breaking it, separating it, as you do with regular crude oil refining. You want to separate it into the sizes so you can refine it for the fuel that you want. So you'd put it into a tower, and the lighter molecules, the lightest being methane, and then ethane, then propane, and it goes down the list. Those are highly volatile. They boil off very easily. They have a low freezing point, which means the same thing. So in cold weather, those would be great. And then the larger molecules settle out at the bottom. They take higher energies to boil them off. They're not very volatile. they don't work well in cold weather, and they're very thick. So at the bottom, you'd have like road tar, motor oils, and at the top, you'd have propane, butane, and those kinds of really light things. So for Jet A, or jet fuel, we're using petroleum crude oil as the feedstock. And so crude oil has a lot of different things in it. And I've seen it broken down like this: 30% alkanes, those are just hydrocarbon chains. Naphthalenes and aromatic rings are circular structures. Asphalics, I've never even heard that. I thought it was aliphatics, but that's a different molecule. So the point is, it's got a lot of weird, complex molecules in it. The image there shows that it also has inorganic compounds. There's calcium, sodium, chlorine. There are metals in there: nickel, vanadium, or that's, I don't think it's, yeah, vanadium, iron. There's molybdenum. There are a bunch of other metals in there, and so it's a really complicated mixture. And that being said, when you have a complicated, well, I'll get to that in a minute. When you burn a complicated mixture, you end up with an even more complicated emission profile. So when you have this complex mixture of hydrocarbons in their typical refining process, you are just, to make it simple, you're just heating up this mixture, and the lighter products come off at the top. That's our methane, propane, butane. And then the heavier is your gasolines, so your 7, 8, 9, 10 carbon chain lengths, which is naphtha as well. Petroleum and naphtha are similar. And then as you get heavier, longer chains, you end up with paraffin, which is like number 1 diesel. Jet fuel, that's what's in there. Diesel is very similar, just a little bit longer chain. Then you get really thick oils below that, and lubricating oils, and then tar and bitumen and all that kind of stuff comes off. So this is as they start off, this is just chemistry 101. You have your 1 carbons: methane, ethane, propane, butane. You've heard of some of these things: hexane, heptane, octane, as you go down the list with increasing carbon chains. So you'll end up with all of these from a crude oil product. And depending on what is most in that crude oil, you'll end up with more of that product. You could also maybe tailor the process a little bit to prioritize one fuel, but you'll end up with a huge mixture like this. So jet fuel is right around that diesel range, and similar to number 2. It's a little bit lighter, but the data I have to show here is for number 2 diesel, which is similar to jet fuel. And it contains anything from, well, you can see the distribution of carbon chain lengths in a typical diesel fuel. So it's anywhere from 9 carbons to 23 carbons. And there's the distribution. The bulk of petroleum number 2 diesel is 16 carbon chain length, which is hexadecane. And then you'll have less and lesser as you go further away from that peak. So that's what you would typically find in a petroleum diesel or SAF product. So petroleum diesel or jet fuel product. The jet fuel would be slightly lower, so it would be centered in on maybe C13 or something. So in each of these carbon chain lengths, so a C10 there, which it shows there's a mass percent of 3% of a C10 carbon chain length in a number 2 diesel. It's comprised of many more than I show here, but on this table, there are 7 versions of a 10 carbon hydrocarbon. So you have naphthalene, tetraline, cisdecylene, all these different things. And you have decane, which is the simple straight carbon one. But there are multiples of each of these. And some of these are aromatics, and some of them are very toxic. And then that's just for the 10 carbon chain. If you look at the 14 carbon chain, you have anthracene, you have all kinds of different things per carbon chain length. So not only does it have a dozen carbon chain lengths, but each of those have dozens of molecules of that type, of that chain length. So when you combust a very complicated mixture with all kinds of things, you get a very complicated combustion emissions spectrum. So you burn one of these things, you might get 3 different molecules. So you get a really complicated, dirty emission. And that's what you see when you see combustion in this diesel truck, a very incomplete combustion, I might say. And then some of the measured exhaust particulates I have on a table that's behind that last picture. And that's just some of the list of chemicals that they find in studying emissions from diesel vehicles. The picture I have here is one that I've taken and shown in some of these talks many times, just showing petroleum diesel just burning in a little dish. So you can see the soot, and it contains all these chemicals. So for sustainable aviation fuel or renewable diesel, our feedstock isn't crude oil. In the US, it's primarily soybean oil. So soybean oil isn't a huge mixture of all these different carbon lengths and aromatics. It's what I have shown here. It's soybean oil is what's in soybean oil. So you have this one molecule. And again, we cut that triglyceride and you end up with three simple hydrocarbon chains and a propane backbone. So you're not going to end up with metals or aromatics or vanadium or iron. Those don't exist here. So that is not one of the things you're going to see in that fuel. Again, it can be made from things beyond soybean oil, all these different methods, but soybean oil is the primary route for the production in North America, so that's what I'll focus on. So similarly, we have, instead of a complex mix of hydrocarbons, we have a simple mixture of hydrocarbons, just triglycerides, essentially. There'll be some fatty acids flowing around, but they're all made from that one main molecule, so you don't have all kinds of things. And because you don't have all those things, you're not going to get all these different distillates come off it. You're not going to get bitumen out of it because there isn't a huge long chain of that in there. You're not going to get lubricating oils necessarily because you don't have those long chains. You're not going to get a ton of methane and ethane. You probably will get some because those molecules can break down smaller, but they're not inherently in vegetable oil or animal fat. So you get a much narrower range of products, which I kind of show here. You're not going to see all these things because they don't really exist in the feedstock. Yeah, so on the top left, you can see that chain from soybean oil is an 18 carbon. So it's not hexadecane, it's two bigger. So it's a C18. You'll get three of those, and you'll get a bunch of C3, which is propane. So those are the two distillates you'll get off. You won't get a lot of the other things, but you can get some because chemistry happens in there, and you would get some, but the primary products should be those two. So again, you don't see this wide distribution because it doesn't really exist. So you eliminate a bunch of those products that exist in SAF or renewable diesel. You get a bunch of these two products. So when you burn them, you're not going to get an infinite number of emissions. You're going to get much narrower range of particles that come out. And so when you burn it, you get flowers that come out. Maybe not flowers, but you can see on the right, this is the picture that I took showing sustainable, or this is renewable diesel burning. Same energy, same everything, but you don't get all the emissions coming off. So this was kind of, I knew that most of our SAF produced in Great Falls went to LA, to LAX. I was told some goes to Calgary because it's a close international airport. They've sent loads off to Minneapolis and Detroit. And those are the ones that I'm aware of that they've sent to. And I know other places have it, but the bulk of what we make here goes to California. And I found this website showing where private jets can purchase fuel that and which airports have SAF. And it said that we have SAF here in Bozeman. So I called, not our airport, but I called this aviation company, and they confirmed that they have it there. I followed through with some numbers, calling some places. I got through to somebody in Dusseldorf, Germany. I talked to somebody there, and I'm waiting to hear back. But they have I think I have it. No, I don't have it here. But they have a book and trade method for all of these airports. So if you want to fly from Jackson to somewhere and you want to use SAF and this they're a member of this group, then you can pay the extra for the SAF, even though you're not burning it, and it'll put it into a different plane, which I've been kind of advocating for a while. We don't have to ship the fuel to LAX, just put it in the planes here that are going to California, and it's the same thing. So they're actively doing that. I'm trying to learn more about it, and I'll let people know if they're interested on what I find out. I found another website that showed where it's available globally. The orange dots are where they get it occasionally, is what they said. The green dots is where it's available all the time. And so the other half of Yellowstone-Teton Clean Cities is in Jackson, Wyoming. And apparently their airport has had batch deliveries. And I think we have somebody here from the Jacksonville airport. Maybe they can speak up if that's true. But apparently it was there at one point, not all the time. but it's scattered throughout the country and the world. Some of the airlines that use SAF include all the main ones. You might see United ads in different airports explaining that they're the leader in SAF adoption. I've seen them myself. And then you can see the others that have used it. And internationally, they use it. But from what I've heard, for planes landing and flying in and out of LAX, SAF is blended into the fuel stock or the fuel system for the airport. So whether you want to use it or not, it's in there, and everybody is going to be using whatever percentage happens to be there. For these other companies, they probably paid a premium or invested in the technology to claim that they are the ones using it. But in LAX, at least from what I understand, it's blended into all the fuel. So just to recap, the differences between SAF and Jet A. This is from the renewable diesel talks I've given a bunch, which is the differences are the same with renewable diesel and petroleum diesel because they're the same. Petroleum diesel or Jet A has a bunch of complicated different chain lengths and different molecules. 75% of them are these simple chain hydrocarbons. 25% of them are these aromatic versions that contain metals. And then in this case, this is a renewable diesel slide, but 100% of the renewable diesel is this small section of those linear hydrocarbons. Now with SAF and Jet A needs some of these aromatic hydrocarbons, these cyclic rings. It needs those to keep the rubber gaskets and things conditioned properly because they've been built with that, and that's how they've been designed to run forever. They can make them that don't need that, but currently they need it, and that's partly why we are limited to 30 to 50% SAF. And what I've read also is that in SAF, they're finding ways to make these cyclic hydrocarbons and adding them into there. So it would be an additive that would then let you run 100% all the time. And again, when you burn that complex mixture, you get a complex soot and emissions, and the simple renewable diesel or SAF is not nearly as sooty. Well, that's all I have. I found these 4 resources to be really good and in-depth and nice graphics. And it seems like there's been a lot of money in publishing this kind of topic. It was a lot easier to find information on this, at least cursory information, than it is to find it on renewable diesel. And you can find a lot more in-depth on renewable diesel, but these are like 20-page PDFs where you can read anything you really want to learn about it. So with that, I'll stop and I'll open up to questions and discussion and suggestions for the next talk or ideas. So thank you, everybody, and we'll go to some questions.
Jesse, I do have a serious question, more than my previous one. What industries are currently using SAF? Like which brands where we might see that used currently?
Well, this is what I found was these are airlines using it. I think this might be one of the only AI generated data points I have, but I did confirm I know some of these, so I trust it. But those are ones that AI told me are using it. ChatGPT told me. I've been on
Nice.
Iceland Air. I think they were using it too when I flew with them a couple of years ago.
And probably governments or states that are subsidizing
Maybe.
programs or
I didn't find anything like that. Like in Great Falls, right next to the North America's leader of SAF production, we have a Malmstrom Air Force Base. They take care of most of the United States nuclear silos, and as far as I know, they're using zero. Like it could just go right across the street to the Air Force Base and be used there, but I don't know. It costs more, and maybe there aren't federal incentives for the military to use it. I bet you they're using some of it, but it doesn't. I didn't find much that told me that.
Okay, thanks.
I'll introduce myself. I'm Craig Foster with the Jackson Hole Flight Services, and operate the FBO at Jackson Hole Airport. So, good information. This was a good review for me. I can share that Jackson Hole Airport has taken SAF in the past. And we continue to look and, obviously want to stay in touch with everybody about potential opportunities. You mentioned Montana Renewables. Montana Renewables makes the neat SAF and then it gets shipped farther away from us. So it's really not very efficient to bring it back once it's been blended and ends up going into airplanes in the northwest of the country. We're hopeful that within the next couple months, according to our fuel supplier, which is a company called Avfuel, that there's going to be a source by rail or pipeline to Colorado, to the Front Range. That will get it closer to us as it is right now. Our fuel supplier, the nearest blended SAF, would have to come out of Northern California. So our fuel supplier does what you mentioned. It's good. They call it a book and claim, where our customers, both whether they be general aviation customers or the airlines, can buy the credits, buy the certificates for the SAF, and put that onto the fuel that they take here. So it's a constantly moving industry. We're excited about where it's headed. We're a long way from our fuel supply and a long way from just a lot of things, period, in Jackson Hole. But we're hopeful that if it gets to the Colorado Front Range, there'll be reason to bring actual physical supply on site, because it's now just another 4 hours from Rawlins, where we get our Jet A, or from Newcastle, which is on the other side of the state. So that's kind of the update from here. But we'll look to stay in touch, and certainly we're interested. So if you come across hints or whatever, glad to share any insights on the ground and gain any insights if others are looking into it.
Well, that's awesome, Craig. Thanks for that. I know some other of the airport operations are considering and maybe are already using some renewable diesel. We've worked with them on that.
Exactly.
I know that Montana Renewables makes some of the best SAF not only do they make the most, but they make some of the best performing SAF that can be blended at the highest concentrations. So I think it is a premium product. And I just know, Wyoming's got about 500,000 people. Probably more people fly out of LAX every year than there are in the whole state. So
Correct.
Both Montana and Wyoming are not huge consumers of that fuel, but it is nearby, and I've spoken with them at Calumet and Montana Renewables many times, and they seem more and more willing to keep it or deliver it in smaller loads than they ever have, because what they sent to Detroit and Minneapolis were tanker trucks at a time, and that's not a huge volume, and they're willing to do it. There's probably a premium to be paid, but I think that we don't necessarily have to bring it from Colorado, maybe initially, but it would be awesome if we could get a group. I just don't know the logistics of aviation jet fuel distribution as much as I do about regular petroleum diesel distribution, but I hope there's a way that we can work and get the local stuff delivered straight from Montana.
That would be great. Like, it is tantalizingly close. It's just it's not blended yet, like you mentioned early on. It's the neat. So it needs to go to have 50 to 70% of the jet fuel added to it, blended, and then can be distributed. So if there's if there's a contact, if you come in contact or somebody to meet with Montana Renewables, obviously we'd want to throw our hat into the ring to say, here's what we're doing. And if there's something they could change to where there was a blending site in Montana, all the better.
Yeah, I should look. I know it's a lot more restricted and precise, these blending, because you can splash blend renewable diesel anywhere. I think for jet fuel is going to have to be very controlled, but it's not that it's complicated. It would probably just have to be in a controlled facility. So I might look into that, see because they must blend Jet A to make Jet A1 in the winter. They must do that. And I don't know why they would ship it all the way, but maybe there's a blending site that exists. I'm going to look into that.
Yeah, anything you learn, I really appreciate having more eyes and ears out there, because like I say, we keep tabs, but we only have our one fuel supplier, and things are popping up all the time that may be an opportunity.
Jesse, I don't know if you can answer this or not, but you had talked about a rather large loan to Montana Renewables that was helping them produce SAF. And can you comment on whether that funding is at risk, or if that was delivered
It,
a long
it
enough
was at
time
risk,
ago.
and it was at risk at the, because I think it was announced in October, November, and then in January it was held back, and then that was a big deal, and then they did get the first half of it, so I think they got 700 million. And I think they've been given this 700 million already. So I think our governor thought, at least he claimed he did, to help release it. I think it's going to go through, and I think they've gotten half of it already. And in one of these previous working groups, we had Michael Wojciechowski mention it, and I think he went through what that expansion is going to entail. And so from that 1.5 billion, they plan to triple their SAF production, which will also increase the renewable diesel production, and those can all be tweaked at any point to focus in on one fuel versus the other if needed. But if anybody's interested in the details of that, he went through where that money, what that expansion hopes to accomplish.
Thanks for that update. Great to know that they got some of that.
Yep. Any other questions about SAF or renewable diesel?
Yeah, real quick,
Suggestions?
Jesse.
Oh, go ahead, Russell.
Yeah, hey, thanks for doing these and keep doing them, please. I know you're, thinking you're starting to run out of topics, but these have been just so good. And might have missed this in the beginning, but wanted to check and see which, some of the producers for SAF, if you could highlight any of those.
I don't think I had them here. I always know that Montana is the number one. So with, I think, any production of renewable diesel, you would get a component of SAF because it's just the lighter fraction. And I think that's a higher value product. So anybody who's making renewable diesel, I think, probably has some volume of SAF that they're producing. And so I know regionally there's a Dickinson, North Dakota has a refinery. We have one in Great Falls. There's one in Rawlings and one in, I think, Cheyenne and Wyoming. And there's a bunch on the West Coast. And there's like 5 in Louisiana. That's the big one. So I would have to assume that most are producing it. Maybe some of them have a way to tweak it to only make renewable diesel, but I think the value added for SAF is so high that you would try to produce some of it. That being said, I think it's all different quality, and I don't know if people have pre-commitments to where it goes. But I might look and see. And if you have any more specific, like if you're interested in a specific refinery, or if there's a reason why you want to know if this refinery has it, I'd look into that too.
Yeah, thanks. I mean, kind of generally and specific, with just looking at the refineries and the businesses that are producing it, and as part of the Clean Cities in Virginia, seeing if there was any partnership possibilities out there with any of the producers.
Yeah, Craig mentioned in there, Neste produces quite a bit, and I've seen that as well. And I'm not sure if that's made overseas in Singapore or in Finland or in the US, but regardless, a lot of their imports to the US of renewable diesel have slowed because there's no longer a blender's credit. So their product is less subsidized, I guess you could say. But I don't think that necessarily affects the SAF. And I don't know if we have Matt Luke on the call from Neste. He said he might try to come. I don't see him here, but he would probably know if that's affecting it.
Gotcha.
But if a refinery wanted to focus, I think they have to just tweak their catalyst a little bit. I mean, it's not a cheap thing, but they could focus on SAF if that was the product they wanted to make more of. And maybe they already are optimized to produce as much of that as they can because it's a higher value product. I'm not sure, but.
Right. Okay. Thanks a lot.
I guess, while I'm here, I'll mention Rad Recycling in Idaho just took their first load of, I think it was, Alicia can correct me, I think it was 10,000 gallons of 10% renewable maybe for the spring, which is awesome. I mean,
Yep.
there's definitely, go ahead. What was it? Either way, they took a big load of some renewable diesel in eastern Idaho, which is awesome. And I think the more that happens, the more people are able to also do it.
Sorry, I missed where in eastern Idaho?
It's either Victor or Driggs, but they recycle. I can't remember if it's Victor or Driggs, but they probably recycle in that whole region. They recycle up to Targhee. They do all the recycling. He's also looking at replacing some of the vehicles with some electric recycling trucks, but apparently he took his first load of renewable last week, I think.
Yeah,
So if you're
they're located in Driggs, but they do trash hauling and recycling in the whole community.
And he has the luxury, he has some bigger tanks, so he's able to take a larger load than some people can. A lot of people don't have their own tanks, so he lucks out there. But if anybody uses that recycler, tell him great job. And anybody's interested in that region with renewable diesel, maybe there's a way we can work together with him to help it make it a little easier. And then I guess I can finish up with a couple of recaps. As far as I understand, Jackson Hole had no issues all winter so far with their renewable diesel use. Big Sky continued to use it this year, no issues. Stillwater Mine, I don't talk about it much because they did it for other reasons, but I actually met a guy yesterday or Sunday who worked there for years. He was a mechanic. He said he remembers when Stillwater Mine, which is the US's only platinum palladium mine, it's here in Montana. They used to use biodiesel because of the emission reduction, and it's an underground mine. They then, I can't remember, it was at Sibanye, which is an African company, bought them up, and he told me they chose to stop using bio or renewable diesel, whichever they're using at the time, because it was too expensive. Within about a month, OSHA or somebody came and shut them down that day, said you have to shut down, the particulate matter in the air is unhealthy and you have a week to fix it. So they quickly just went back to renewable diesel, the premium, and then immediately that issue was resolved and they could open up again. So it shut down a multi-billion-dollar mine because they're using petroleum, and renewable was the solution. And I heard about this, but he worked there and saw it firsthand, so he confirmed it. All right, any last questions or ideas to talk about next time? Having learned a little bit about SAF here, making this presentation, I have some ideas. I'd like to get this guy from Germany about the book and trade and how well it works globally. That's kind of getting off of our regional goal of talking about renewable diesel, but it's something newer and interesting. It's also still available here in Bozeman at our card lock. As far as I know, it's available in Jackson as still at the Shell. Nampa still has it. We're working on getting another gas station somewhere in Idaho with Parkland to make it available at another spot. That's about it. So I'll end it there. I'll hang out if anybody has any final questions, but I'll stop the recording, and hopefully we'll see everybody next time. Thanks.